I stood there holding a crumpled lottery ticket while my twin sister Madison clutched house keys, and I realized 22 years of my life had been a lie. The graduation party fell silent as Mom smiled at Madison's squeals of joy over her brand-new 3-bedroom home, while Dad avoided my eyes completely. That lottery ticket felt like tissue paper in my trembling hands. I had graduated summa cum laude with a degree in finance, while Madison barely scraped by with a communications major, yet somehow she deserved a house, and I got a dollar scratch-off. Everything was about to change forever. The morning had started like a dream. Walking across the stage at State University, I felt the weight of my mortarboard as Dean Richardson called my name, followed by summa cum laude. 4 years of 18-hour days, working part-time at the campus bookstore, surviving on ramen noodles and determination had led to this moment. My finance degree represented sacrifices most people my age couldn't imagine making. Madison crossed the same stage 23 minutes later. Her name announced without any academic honors, but our parents Frank and Carol cheered from the bleachers like she'd just won a Nobel Prize. I remember feeling a familiar pang of confusion about why her mediocre achievement warranted the same celebration as my academic excellence. Now, 6 hours later in our family home in suburban Denver, that confusion had crystallized into something much darker. The graduation party buzzed around me while I processed the house key ceremony that had just unfolded. Aunt Linda was examining Madison's keys like they were ancient artifacts. Uncle Robert was congratulating her on having such generous parents, and my cousin Ashley was already planning Madison's housewarming party. Meanwhile, I stood invisible in my own family's living room, holding what appeared to be a gas station lottery ticket. The unfairness wasn't new, but the magnitude of it was staggering. Christmas mornings flashed through my memory like a highlight reel of parental favoritism. Madison unwrapping designer purses, jewelry, the latest electronics, while my presents were consistently practical. Textbooks for my major, a desk lamp for studying, gift cards to office supply stores. When relatives noticed the disparity, Mom would smile and explain that I was the responsible one who appreciated practical gifts. Madison's 16th birthday had brought a silver Honda Civic with a giant red bow tied to the hood. Mine had brought a 10-speed bicycle and a lecture about building character through hard work. Madison's senior prom dress cost $600 from an upscale boutique in Cherry Creek. I wore cousin Ashley's altered dress from 2 years prior, and everyone praised my creativity and resourcefulness. College had revealed the pattern most clearly. Madison's tuition appeared magically paid each semester, her dorm room in the newer residence hall, her meal plan, upgraded to include the fancy dining options. She studied communications because, as Dad frequently mentioned, Madison has natural people skills. Meanwhile, I worked 25 hours per week at various campus jobs, accumulated student loans that made my stomach hurt every time I signed the paperwork, and chose finance because numbers couldn't lie to you the way people apparently could. During spring breaks, Madison posted Instagram photos from Cancun beaches with her sorority sisters while I worked overtime shifts at a tax preparation office in Denver. Her social media was filled with restaurant dinners, shopping hauls, weekend trips to Vail with friends. Mine featured study group photos in the library and occasional pictures of textbooks with captions about grinding for the future. Frank Brennan owned Brennan's Auto Repair on the east side of town, specializing in domestic vehicles and small engine work. Carol managed bookkeeping for local businesses, including a dental office and 2 small retail stores. They earned decent middle-class income, enough for a nice 3-bedroom house in Thornton, annual vacations to visit Carol's sister in Phoenix, and comfortable suburban lifestyle. They weren't wealthy by Denver standards, but they weren't struggling either, which made Madison's house gift even more bewildering. 3-bedroom homes in decent neighborhoods cost upwards of $200,000. Where had my parents found that kind of money? And why had they decided Madison deserved it, while I deserved a lottery ticket that probably wouldn't win enough to buy lunch? "Scratch it off!" Madison suddenly announced, pointing at my ticket with excitement that felt forced. "Let's see what Rhonda won." Every guest turned toward me with expectant faces. Carol stepped closer, and I noticed something strange in her expression. She looked almost nervous, like she was anticipating a specific outcome rather than simply hoping for good luck. Frank cleared his throat but remained silent, his mechanic's hands fidgeting with a beer bottle. His discomfort was palpable, unusual for a man who typically commanded any room he entered. I examined the lottery ticket more carefully. It wasn't a standard Colorado lottery scratch-off. The design was more elaborate, with gold foil accents and what appeared to be a special promotional logo I'd never seen before. The ticket felt heavier than normal scratch-offs, the paper quality noticeably different. With 20-plus family members watching, I used my thumbnail to scratch away the metallic coating. The first symbol revealed itself. A 7. Then another 7 appeared. A third 7. The anticipation in the room became electric as I uncovered the prize amount, $3 million. The silence that followed was absolute and profound. Madison's celebration stopped mid-squeal, the house keys slipping from her fingers and clattering against the hardwood floor. The metallic sound echoed through the suddenly quiet room like a gunshot. "That's impossible," Madison whispered, her voice barely audible. Then, louder, and with growing anger, "That's absolutely impossible." But the ticket was real. The numbers were clear. The Colorado Lottery logo was authentic. I was holding $3 million in winning lottery ticket, and the energy in the room had shifted dramatically. The responsible, overlooked, practical daughter had just become the family millionaire. Aunt Linda rushed over with her reading glasses, examining the ticket like she was authenticating currency. "This is legitimate," she announced. "These are official state lottery symbols. Rhonda actually won $3 million. The party erupted into chaotic celebration, but something felt wrong about my parents' reactions. Instead of joy or excitement, Frank and Carol were exchanging worried glances across the room. They looked like people whose carefully constructed plan had just gone sideways. "Congratulations, sweetheart," Carol said, approaching me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This is incredible news. But you know, lottery winnings come with significant tax implications. There are smart strategies for handling this kind of windfall, especially when it can benefit the entire family." The way she emphasized entire family sent a chill down my spine. Within minutes of discovering I'd won $3 million, my mother was already making plans for how we should spend my money. Frank nodded enthusiastically behind her. "Your mother's absolutely right. This kind of money requires careful financial planning. Maybe tomorrow we should all sit down and discuss how to maximize this opportunity for everyone involved." Madison had retrieved her house keys from the floor, but was gripping them so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked dangerously close to fury. As I stood there holding my lottery ticket while family members began approaching with congratulations and immediate suggestions about investment opportunities, one thought kept echoing in my mind. My parents' reaction to my $3 million win felt less like celebration and more like damage control. And I was absolutely going to find out why. The aftermath of my lottery announcement felt like watching our family dynamics explode in slow motion. Madison's mood had shifted from graduation joy to barely contained rage in the span of 5 minutes. She retreated to the kitchen island, stabbing at her graduation cake with unnecessary violence while shooting dark looks in my direction. The party guests, however, had transformed into my new best friends. My phone started buzzing immediately, with text messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Uncle Robert, who usually ignored me at family gatherings, suddenly wanted to discuss smart investment strategies and family financial planning. Cousin Ashley, who had always been firmly in Madison's camp during childhood disputes, was now suggesting we grab lunch soon to catch up. But the messages from distant relatives were the most revealing. Within an hour, I received texts from people I'd barely spoken to since childhood, all suddenly interested in my well-being and financial future. From my third cousin Beth in Kansas, "Mom told me about your incredible luck. I'm starting a nonprofit organization, helping single mothers. Would love to discuss how your windfall could make a real difference." From Stephanie, a high school acquaintance, "Saw on Facebook about your lottery win. Congratulations. I'm launching a boutique business and looking for investors. We should definitely talk." from distant relatives, former classmates, and acquaintances I'd forgotten existed. A parade of congratulations, followed by immediate requests for loans, investments, and business opportunities. $3 million was apparently enough to make me every distant relative's favorite person and every old acquaintance's potential business partner. But Madison's social media response bothered me most. She'd posted on Instagram within an hour of leaving the party. Funny how some people get everything handed to them, while others work hard for what they have. Life's interesting that way. The passive-aggressive attack was classic Madison, but seeing it in writing crystallized something I'd been trying to ignore for years. She genuinely believed she was the hard-working victim in our family dynamic, despite receiving every advantage our parents could provide. I decided to visit the Colorado Lottery headquarters on Bannock Street the next morning to officially claim my prize. The building looked surprisingly mundane for a place that changed lives daily. After 3 hours of paperwork, identity verification, tax discussions, and legal documentation, I walked out with official confirmation. $2,100,000 would be deposited into my designated account after federal and state tax obligations. Still life-changing money, but the tax reality brought me back to earth quickly. Uncle Sam in the state of Colorado had first claims on my windfall, reducing the fantasy aspect considerably. When I returned to Thornton that afternoon, Madison's Honda was in the driveway, alongside Tyler Morrison's black pickup truck. Tyler was Madison's on-and-off boyfriend of 3 years, a guy who worked construction when he felt motivated and had strong opinions about other people's finances, despite his own perpetual financial instability. I found them in our living room with my parents, papers scattered across the coffee table like they were planning a military campaign. The conversation stopped abruptly when I entered, 4 pairs of eyes turning toward me with expressions ranging from nervous to calculating. "Rhonda!" Carol's voice carried forced enthusiasm. "Perfect timing. We've been discussing some exciting possibilities for your lottery winnings." Tyler stood up and extended his hand like we were being formally introduced. "Rhonda, congratulations on your good fortune. I've been sharing with your family some incredible investment opportunities that could really multiply those winnings." "What kind of opportunities?" I asked, deliberately not shaking his hand. Tyler settled back onto the couch next to Madison, his confidence returning. "My cousin Brandon owns a construction company that's expanding into luxury home renovation. They're actively seeking investors who want ground floor opportunities. With your $3 million, you could easily see returns of 25 to 30% within 18 months. Madison jumped in eagerly. Tyler also understands cryptocurrency investments. Some of his friends have tripled their initial investments in less than 8 months. Frank leaned forward in his recliner, his mechanic's hands clasped together. "We were also considering the family business, Rhonda. The auto shop could really benefit from modernization. New diagnostic equipment, maybe expansion into electric vehicle repair. That's the future of the automotive industry." Carol nodded with theatrical enthusiasm. "And Madison's mortgage payments would be much more manageable, with a little family assistance. The monthly payment is only $1,200. You could eliminate that debt entirely and still have plenty remaining for other investments." I looked around the room at 4 faces staring at me with obvious expectation, and the cold realization hit me. This wasn't a family celebration or even a planning session. This was a sales presentation. They had spent the last 18 hours strategizing how to spend my lottery money. "How much did Madison's house cost?" I asked quietly. Madison brightened immediately. $238,000. It's a gorgeous 3-bedroom in Thornton, with a 2-car garage and mountain views from the back deck. "What was the down payment?" The question seemed to catch everyone off guard. Madison glanced at our parents before answering. "Well, Mom and Dad helped with the down payment requirements. 20%, so about $47,600. Where did Mom and Dad get $47,600 for a house down payment?" The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably long. Frank and Carol exchanged one of their loaded looks, while Madison suddenly found her manicured fingernails fascinating. Tyler cleared his throat awkwardly. Maybe this is a private family conversation I shouldn't be part of. No, I said firmly. Please stay. I'm very curious about these investment opportunities you mentioned. What exactly does your cousin's construction company need investor money for? Tyler's confidence wavered slightly. Equipment purchases, labor costs, materials, construction requires significant upfront capital. What's the company's official name? Mountain Peak Construction Services. Are they registered with the Colorado Secretary of State's Business Division? Tyler's face flushed, noticeably. Of course they are. Why would you ask something like that? I was asking because my finance degree had taught me to research thoroughly before investing, and something about Tyler's body language suggested Mountain Peak Construction Services might exist primarily in his imagination. Madison was biting her lower lip, a nervous habit from childhood. While my parents were studying everything except my face. I appreciate everyone's concern about my financial planning decisions, I said slowly, but I think I need time to research investment options independently. Carol's face fell dramatically. Honey, we just want to help you make intelligent decisions. This amount of money can be overwhelming for someone your age. I'm 22, Mom. The same age as Madison. Apparently old enough to own a house. Frank stood up abruptly. Rhonda, there's no reason to be defensive about this. We're family. We support each other. That's what families do. As I looked around the room at my parents and Madison's boyfriend, all of whom seemed to have detailed plans for spending my lottery money less than 24 hours after I'd won it, one thought dominated my mind. Something about this entire situation was fundamentally wrong. That evening, I drove to my apartment near campus and spent hours researching Tyler's supposed investment opportunities. Mountain Peak Construction Services was registered with the state, but their business license had been inactive for 8 months. The address listed was a residential home in Aurora that belonged to Tyler's ex-girlfriend. Madison's house purchase was also worth investigating. Public records showed the property had been bought with a conventional mortgage requiring 20% down. But the financial timeline didn't make sense, given my parents' known income from the auto shop and bookkeeping work. The more I researched, the more questions emerged. If my parents had nearly $50,000 available for Madison's down payment, why had I needed student loans for college? If they could afford to gift a house, why was my graduation present a lottery ticket? But the lottery ticket itself was the biggest mystery. I'd assumed it was a random purchase, a last-minute graduation gift grabbed from the nearest convenience store. Now I was wondering if there was more to the story. The next morning, I drove to the Colorado Lottery's customer service office and requested information about my winning ticket. The representative, a professional woman named Jennifer, pulled up the ticket details on her computer system. "This is very interesting," Jennifer said, studying her screen carefully. "Your ticket was part of a special promotional batch distributed to select retailers 4 weeks ago. The winning odds were significantly enhanced compared to standard scratch-off games, 1 in 4,000, instead of our typical 1 in 2.8 million. Which retailers received these promotional tickets?" Jennifer consulted another database screen. Only 14 retailers statewide received this special batch. Most were located in the Denver metropolitan area. She printed a list and handed it across her desk. Cooper's Corner Market was highlighted in yellow as my ticket's point of purchase. Cooper's Corner Market was located exactly 2.3 miles from my parents' house, directly adjacent to Frank's auto repair shop. I'd passed it thousands of times but rarely shopped there, as it primarily served the industrial district workers with cigarettes, energy drinks, and lottery tickets. When I visited Cooper's that afternoon, Mr. Cooper himself was working behind the counter. He recognized me immediately from neighborhood familiarity. "Rhonda Brennan, heard you hit the jackpot on one of my tickets. Your dad must be thrilled about that outcome." "My dad?" Mr. Cooper's friendly expression shifted slightly. "Well, yes. He bought that ticket. Been coming in regularly for weeks, asking about special promotions and new ticket releases. Very persistent about finding tickets with better winning odds. When I received that promotional batch 4 weeks ago, he purchased 12 of them. The world seemed to tilt sideways. My father had bought 12 promotional lottery tickets with enhanced odds, and somehow one had become my graduation gift. This wasn't random luck or last-minute thoughtfulness. This was calculated planning. Did he explain why he wanted tickets with better odds? Mr. Cooper stroked his gray beard thoughtfully. Mentioned something about a graduation gift needing to be memorable. Wanted to ensure whoever received it would win something worthwhile. Seemed like thoughtful parenting at the time. I thanked Mr. Cooper and sat in my car outside his store, trying to process this information. My parents had mortgaged their house to buy Madison a home, then deliberately purchased lottery tickets with enhanced odds for my graduation gift, clearly expecting me to win money they could then access to manage their new financial obligations. The entire situation had been orchestrated, but I suspected the manipulation went much deeper than a rigged graduation gift. The next morning brought a revelation that shattered my remaining faith in my family's honesty. I had decided to check my credit report, something I'd been meaning to do since graduation but kept postponing. What I discovered there made the intercepted job offers seem like minor infractions. 3 accounts existed that I'd never opened or authorized. A Pinnacle Bank credit card showing a current balance of $11,200. A personal loan through Mountain View Credit Union for $9,800 with 22 months of payment history. Most shocking was a co-signed automobile loan for $24,700 with regular payments documented from an account I didn't recognize. Someone had been systematically using my identity to secure credit for years, making minimum payments to maintain good standing, and actually improving my credit score in the process. The careful management of these fraudulent accounts had kept them hidden from casual observation. I drove immediately to Pinnacle Bank with printed copies of my credit report and identification documents. The customer service manager, Angela Rodriguez, accessed my account details with professional efficiency. This credit card was opened 26 months ago, through online application, Angela explained, scrolling through transaction history. The billing address on file is 1,847 Maple Grove Drive in Thornton, my parents' exact address. The spending pattern indicates retail purchases, restaurant transactions, and regular cash advances. Monthly payments have been made automatically from a checking account belonging to. She paused to verify the information. Carol and Franklin Brennan. My parents had opened a credit card using my identity and had been funding Madison's lifestyle with it for over 2 years. The transaction history aligned perfectly with Madison's social media posts, designer clothing purchases, expensive restaurant dinners, weekend shopping trips to Cherry Creek Mall, and cash advances that probably funded her spring break vacations. The automobile loan documentation was even more disturbing. It financed Madison's Honda Civic, the car she'd received for her 16th birthday, that I'd always assumed represented years of parental saving. They had used my credit history to purchase her vehicle, then made payments from their personal account to maintain the illusion of generous gift-giving. Angela assisted me in filing formal fraud reports for all 3 unauthorized accounts, but she also explained the legal complexities. Proving family financial fraud becomes complicated when perpetrators maintain payments and manage accounts responsibly. Law enforcement would investigate, but prosecution typically required victim willingness to pursue criminal charges against family members. I left Pinnacle Bank feeling physically ill and drove home to confront my parents directly. When I arrived, Madison's Honda was parked in the driveway alongside Tyler's pickup truck, and voices carried from the backyard. They were planning something. An instinct told me it wasn't a casual family gathering. I parked around the corner and approached through our neighbor's yard, positioning myself where I could hear their conversation through the kitchen window without being detected. "She's being completely unreasonable about sharing the money," Madison was saying, her voice carrying obvious frustration. "Lottery winnings should benefit the whole family." Tyler's voice joined the conversation. "I spoke with my friend Derek, who works in law, and he thinks we might have grounds to challenge her claim. If we can demonstrate your parents intended the ticket as a family gift meant to benefit everyone, we could potentially force equal distribution of winnings." My father's response sounded strained and worried. "Tyler, I don't think legal challenges are the right approach here. Rhonda's intelligent and determined. She's going to discover what we've been doing financially, and if she becomes angry enough, she might." "Might what?" Carol's voice carried sharp anxiety. "Press criminal charges for identity theft." "The credit cards?" The loans, everything. Angela Rodriguez from Pinnacle Bank contacted me this morning. Rhonda knows about all the accounts. The silence that followed felt ominous. I pressed closer to the window, my heart pounding so loudly. I worried they might hear it. Madison's voice was smaller when she spoke again. What do you mean, identity theft? Frank sighed heavily before answering. We've been using Rhonda's credit history to manage some family expenses. Your car payment, several credit cards, personal loans when our business income fell short. We always made payments on time, so we convinced ourselves it wasn't really harmful. You committed identity fraud? Tyler's voice rose in disbelief. Are you completely insane? That's a serious federal crime. We were supporting our family, Carol said defensively. Everything we did was for our daughter's benefit. The lottery ticket was supposed to resolve all these financial complications. Rhonda would win enough to pay off outstanding debts and help Madison with her house payments, and everyone would benefit. Except now she knows about the fraud, Madison said quietly, and she's not sharing anything with anyone. Tyler's tone became calculating. Maybe she doesn't have to know that we know she knows. We could still pursue legal action, claiming the lottery ticket was always intended as shared family property. With what attorney? Frank asked practically. Tyler, we can't afford legal battles with Rhonda. If she files criminal charges for identity theft, we could face serious jail time. Not all of us, Tyler pointed out. Madison didn't participate directly in the identity fraud. Madison's response shocked me completely. Yes, I did. The admission hung in the air like toxic smoke. My twin sister had known about the identity theft all along. I knew about the credit cards. Madison continued with growing emotion. I knew the car loan was in Rhonda's name instead of yours. I didn't think it mattered since you were making all the payments anyway. And Rhonda was always so responsible with money management. I figured she could handle the credit impact better than I could. Tyler's voice turned cautious. Madison, you just admitted to knowingly participating in identity theft. That makes you a legal accomplice to federal crimes. The conversation continued, but I'd heard enough to understand the complete scope of their betrayal. My entire family had been systematically stealing my identity for years, using my credit history to fund a lifestyle they couldn't legitimately afford, while keeping me financially dependent through hidden job opportunities and emotional manipulation. As I walked back to my car, a more disturbing realization emerged. If my parents were desperate enough to mortgage their house and commit identity fraud, if they were willing to involve Tyler in legal schemes to claim my lottery winnings, then there had to be deeper secrets they were hiding. I drove to the Adams County Courthouse and spent the remainder of the afternoon searching public records databases. What I discovered in the adoption records section completely transformed my understanding of our family history. Madison Elizabeth Brennan had been legally adopted by Franklin and Carol Brennan on March 22nd, 21 years ago. She wasn't my biological twin sister. According to court documents, she'd been placed in state foster care after her biological parents were killed in an automobile accident, then adopted by my parents when she was 3 years old, the same age I had been when my biological twin sister Rebecca died from pneumonia complications. Everything suddenly made perfect sense. The obvious favoritism, the financial manipulation, the guilt-driven gift-giving. My parents had lost their biological daughter and replaced her with Madison, then spent 2 decades trying to recreate their lost family by treating Madison like their real daughter, while treating me like a painful reminder of their loss. But they had never told either of us the truth about our identities. I sat in my car outside the courthouse, holding copies of Madison's adoption paperwork, and realized my entire life had been constructed on deliberate lies. Madison wasn't my sister. My real sister was dead. My parents had been using both of us as actors in some psychological drama for 20 years. The cruelest aspect was that Madison probably didn't know either. She'd been living a fabricated identity just as completely as I had, except her lie came with houses and credit cards and unconditional parental affection. Now, I faced a choice about what to do with this devastating truth. Armed with Madison's adoption documents, I decided to dig deeper into our family's hidden history. If my parents had been lying about something as fundamental as Madison's identity for 21 years, what other secrets were they concealing? The next morning, I requested my own adoption records from Adams County. What I found there made my hands shake as I read through the legal documentation. I had been removed from my biological parents, David and Sharon Collins, through a disputed custody proceeding when I was 3 years old. The court records showed that David and Sharon had fought desperately to retain custody after Rebecca's death, but ultimately lost to the Brennans, who had better legal representation and more financial resources. My biological parents had never voluntarily given me up for adoption. I had been taken from them. The legal files contained contact information that was 21 years old, but it provided a starting point for research. David and Sharon Collins had lived in Fort Collins when they lost custody of me. A quick internet search revealed they still lived at the same address, which meant they had stayed in the same house for over 2 decades, possibly hoping I would someday find my way back to them. Before I contacted my biological parents, I decided to confront my family with everything I'd learned. That evening, I drove to my parents' house carrying 2 manila folders, one containing Madison's adoption papers, the other containing my own custody records. Madison was staying there temporarily because of plumbing issues in her new house, though I suspected the real reason was financial difficulty with mortgage payments she couldn't afford independently. I found them gathered in the living room after dinner. Tyler was there again, lounging on our couch, like he belonged in our family discussions, which irritated me more than it should have. "We need to have a conversation about honesty," I announced, placing both folders on the coffee table. "All of us." Carol reached toward the folders, but I pulled them back. "Before you examine those documents, I want to know how long you plan to continue lying to us about our identities." Frank reached for the television remote and turned off the sound, his face already pale with anticipation. "I'm talking about Madison's adoption papers," I continued. "I'm talking about the fact that my biological twin sister Rebecca is dead, and you replaced her with Madison without telling either of us the truth." The color drained completely from Madison's face. She looked between our parents and me, her mouth opening and closing silently like she was trying to speak underwater. "You're lying," Madison finally whispered. "That's completely impossible." I opened the first folder and handed her the official adoption documentation, March 22nd, 21 years ago. Madison Elizabeth Patterson was adopted by Franklin and Carol Brennan after her biological parents were killed in an automobile accident. You were 3 years old, the same age my biological twin sister Rebecca was when she died from pneumonia. Madison stared at the legal documents like they were written in an ancient language she couldn't decipher. Tyler leaned over to read them, his expression growing serious as he processed the official terminology and court seals. Carol immediately began crying, the kind of deep, body-shaking sobs that emerge from years of suppressed guilt. Frank simply looked defeated, older than his 58 years, like the weight of maintaining these lies had finally become unbearable. "We were planning to tell you both," Frank said quietly. "When you were older, when you could understand the complexities." "I'm 22 years old," I said firmly. "How much older did I need to be to deserve the truth?" "We were terrified," Carol whispered through her tears. "Afraid you would leave us. Afraid Madison would want to research her biological family. Afraid everything would fall apart. If you knew." Madison was still staring at her adoption papers with devastating focus. "My real parents are dead?" "Yes," Frank answered gently. "They died when you were very young. You don't have any memories of them. But I'm not actually Rhonda's sister." Hearing Madison speak those words out loud hit me harder than I'd anticipated. Even though I'd known the truth for days, having her acknowledge it made the reality undeniable in a way documents couldn't. "Not biologically," Carol said desperately. "But you've been sisters for 19 years. That relationship has to mean something." Tyler shifted uncomfortably on the couch. "Maybe I should leave. This seems like a private family discussion." "No," Madison said sharply, her voice carrying new authority. "Stay here. Because apparently, I don't understand what family means anymore." She turned toward our parents with an expression I'd never seen before. Betrayal mixed with anger and something that looked like profound loss. Is this why you always treated me differently? Because you felt guilty about replacing Rhonda's real sister with me? Madison, absolutely not, Carol said frantically. We love you completely. We've always loved you. You weren't a replacement for Rebecca. You were our daughter. Then explain the special treatment. The house, the car, the credit cards, college expenses. Why did Rhonda get nothing while I received everything? Frank and Carol exchanged another loaded look, and I realized there were still more secrets they hadn't revealed. Because, Frank said slowly, as if the words were being pulled from him, your biological parents left you a substantial trust fund. We've been managing it as your legal guardian since the adoption, and when you turn 25, you'll inherit approximately $380,000. The silence that followed was complete and profound. Madison had a trust fund. She was going to inherit nearly $400,000. My parents had been lavishing her with gifts and privileges not from favoritism, but because they were essentially spending her own money on her. Where's my inheritance? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Rhonda, Carol began hesitantly. Your biological parents, David and Sharon Collins, spent everything they had fighting the custody battle. Legal fees, court costs, expert witnesses. By the time the adoption was finalized, they had no money left for any kind of inheritance. But they're still alive. My statement seemed to shock them. Frank sat up straighter in his recliner. How could you possibly know that? I opened the second folder and displayed my custody records. Because I found them. David and Sharon Collins. They live in Fort Collins, at the same address they've had for 21 years. They never stopped trying to find me. Carol's face went completely white. Rhonda, you cannot contact them. Please. They tried to take you away from us once. Maybe they should have succeeded. The words emerged harsher than I'd intended, but I was exhausted from protecting everyone else's emotions when no one had ever protected mine. Madison was still processing her trust fund revelation. $380,000? It was your biological parents' life insurance settlement plus property they owned, Frank explained. We've been investing it conservatively. By your 25th birthday, it could be worth significantly more. So you've been spending my money on me my entire life? We've been caring for you exactly as your biological parents would have wanted. Tyler finally spoke. This completely changes the lottery situation. Madison's going to be wealthy independently. She doesn't need Rhonda's winnings. Madison turned on him with fury I'd never seen before. Is money all you care about? Really? I care about you, Tyler said defensively. But financial security matters. This means you don't need family financial support anymore. That's when Madison did something that surprised everyone in the room. She began laughing. Not joyful laughter, but the bitter, painful laughter that comes from recognizing how absurd your existence has become. None of this is real, she said, still laughing with increasing desperation. My entire life is fake. My parents aren't my parents. My sister isn't my sister. My boyfriend only cares about money I didn't know existed. Even my name probably isn't really Madison. Frank leaned forward. Your biological name was Emily Rose Patterson. Your biological parents called you Emmy. The laughter stopped immediately. Madison, or Emily, or whoever she really was, stared at Frank, like he'd physically struck her. 22 years, she said quietly. 22 years of being someone else completely. I found myself feeling genuinely sorry for her. Despite everything she'd done, we'd both been living fabricated lives, just different varieties of lies. She'd received privileges and advantages, but she'd also experienced the complete erasure of her authentic identity. I'd been neglected and manipulated, but I'd retained some connection to my real self. I'm calling my biological parents tomorrow, I announced decisively. David and Sharon Collins deserve to know I'm alive and safe. Carol began crying harder. Rhonda, please don't make any hasty decisions. We're still your family. We raised you. We love you. You stole my identity. You lied about my history. You kept me financially dependent while spending someone else's trust fund on my fake sister. That isn't love, Mom. That's control and manipulation. Frank stood up slowly, looking every one of his years. What do you want from us, Rhonda? How do we fix this? I looked around the room at the people I'd called family for 22 years and realized the lottery ticket had given me something more valuable than $3 million. It had given me the independence to demand truth. I want complete honesty. I want you to repay every penny you stole through identity theft. I want Madison to understand her lifestyle has been funded by her dead parents' money. And I want the absolute truth about why you gave me that lottery ticket. Carol and Frank exchanged their familiar loaded glance, and I knew there was still one final secret. The truth is, Frank said heavily, we're facing bankruptcy. The auto shop is failing. Our mortgage payments are behind. We borrowed against Madison's trust fund to cover business expenses and personal debts, and now we can't repay it. When Madison turns 25 next year, we'll have to admit there's no money left. Madison's face went white. You spent my inheritance? We borrowed against it temporarily, Carol said desperately. We always intended to pay it back with interest. How much is actually left? Frank's voice was barely audible. Approximately $28,000. $380,000 reduced to $28,000. My parents hadn't just been stealing from me through identity fraud. They'd been embezzling Madison's inheritance too, spending her biological parents' money to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't legitimately afford. Madison stood up slowly, her legs visibly unsteady. Tyler was right about one thing. This does change everything. About everything. She walked to the front door, then turned back to look at all of us with an expression of complete devastation. I'm going to my house. My fake house that I can't afford, bought with stolen money. And I'm going to figure out who Emily Patterson really is, because she's obviously nothing like the person I've been pretending to be. After Madison left, Tyler scrambling behind her like a confused puppy, I remained in the living room with my parents and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete clarity about my next steps. I'm pressing criminal charges, I said quietly. For identity theft, credit fraud, all of it. And I'm calling David and Sharon Collins first thing tomorrow morning. Carol reached toward me, but I stepped back. Rhonda, please. We're your parents. We made terrible mistakes, but we're still your family. No, I said, moving toward the door. You're strangers who stole 22 years of my life to play house with other people's children, but that ends right now. As I reached the door, Frank called after me. What about forgiveness? What about family loyalty? I turned back one final time. I'll save my loyalty for people who actually exist. My biological parents have been waiting 21 years to hear from me. They've waited long enough. For the first time in my life, I walked out of that house feeling like I was finally walking toward home. The drive to Fort Collins the next morning felt like traveling toward my authentic life after 22 years of living someone else's story. I'd called David and Sharon Collins the night before, and Sharon had cried when she heard my voice. They'd given me directions to their house and told me they'd been hoping for this day since I was 3 years old. The house was a modest, ranch-style home on a quiet street, lined with mature cottonwood trees. When Sharon Collins opened the front door, I immediately recognized features I'd seen in my own mirror. The same green eyes, the same stubborn jawline, the same way of tilting our heads when processing information. Rhonda? She whispered, covering her mouth with trembling hands. Yes, ma'am. I'm Rhonda Brennan, but I think my real name is probably Rhonda Collins. She pulled me into a hug that felt like coming home after a lifetime of being lost in foreign territory. David appeared behind her, a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes who looked at me like I was a miracle he'd stopped believing could happen. We never gave up looking, he said simply. 21 years, and we never stopped hoping we'd find you. They invited me inside, and I spent the next 4 hours learning about my real family history. David was a retired high school math teacher. Sharon worked as a registered nurse at Poudre Valley Hospital. They had tried to have more children after losing custody of me and Rebecca, but fertility treatments hadn't worked, so they'd channeled their energy into their careers and their search for me. The Brennans fought us viciously in court, Sharon explained. showing me boxes of legal documents they'd preserved for 2 decades. They had more money, better attorneys, and the sympathy advantage of having lost their own daughter. They convinced the judge we were unfit parents because we couldn't afford expensive legal representation. David added, "We spent our entire savings on court costs and legal fees, sold our house, liquidated retirement accounts, borrowed against everything we owned. But it wasn't enough to compete with their resources. We hired private investigators every few years," Sharon continued. "But the Brennans moved frequently when you were younger, and sealed adoption records made tracking nearly impossible. They showed me photograph albums they'd maintained of my early childhood, pictures from the 3 months I'd lived with them after Rebecca's death, images of 3-year-old me playing in their backyard, painting pictures at their kitchen table, sleeping in a bedroom decorated with stars and planets. You were fascinated by astronomy," David said softly. "You constantly pointed at the night sky and announced you wanted to count every single star. You had a stuffed elephant named Mr. Peanuts that you carried everywhere," Sharon added. "You cried for him every night for months after the adoption was finalized. Learning about my authentic early childhood felt like discovering missing pieces of my identity puzzle. The Brennan house had never felt like home, but this place, with these people, felt like where I truly belonged. I told them everything about my life with the Brennans. The systematic favoritism toward Madison, the identity theft, the intercepted job opportunities, the lottery ticket manipulation, the discovery that Madison was also adopted. They listened without judgment, though I could see anger building in David's eyes as I described the financial abuse. "That explains their determination to keep you away from us," Sharon said when I finished. "We wondered why they fought so hard in court if they genuinely loved you and wanted to protect their family. But they were protecting their guilt," David observed. "They replaced their dead daughter with someone else's child, then had to deal with you as a constant reminder of their loss." Sharon reached across their kitchen table and took my hand. "Rhonda, I need you to understand that not a single day has passed that we haven't thought about you. We have college savings accounts we've contributed to for 21 years, hoping someday we'd find you and could help with your education. You have college funds for me?" David nodded. "Your education fund has about $73,000 now. We never touched it, even during our most difficult financial periods, because it belonged to your future. $73,000. While the Brennans were intercepting my job offers and keeping me financially dependent, my biological parents had been saving money for my education for over 2 decades. There's something else," Sharon said gently. "We've been working with a family therapist for years, Dr. Patricia Martinez, trying to process our loss and the legal trauma. She's helped us prepare for the possibility that we might locate you someday. She's been very clear that we can't expect instant acceptance from you, and we don't want to pressure you into any relationship. But we'd love to try building a connection with you, if you're willing," David added carefully. "Whatever that looks like, we understand the Brennans raised you, and they're the parents you've known. We just want to be part of your life somehow, if you'll allow it." Looking at these 2 people who had fought for me, saved for me, and never stopped hoping to find me, I felt something I'd never experienced with the Brennans. Unconditional love, without manipulation or hidden agendas. "I'd like that very much," I said. "I'd really like that." That afternoon, Sharon and David insisted on driving me back to Denver to collect my belongings from the Brennan house. I had called ahead to inform Frank and Carol we were coming, but I wasn't prepared for the scene we discovered. Madison's Honda was in the driveway, but Tyler's truck was conspicuously absent. When we entered the house, we found Madison sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by legal documents, tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" I asked, momentarily forgetting we were in the middle of a family crisis. Madison looked up with red, swollen eyes. "Tyler left this morning after I told him about the trust fund being depleted. He said he couldn't be in a relationship with someone who didn't have money." Carol was hovering anxiously nearby. "Madison, sweetheart, you're better off without him. He was only interested in what you could provide financially, just like everyone else in this family," Madison said bitterly. "Tyler wanted my money. You and Dad spent my money. Rhonda's biological parents fought for her, while mine are dead. I don't have anything real in my entire life. I introduced Madison to David and Sharon, who were gracious, but understandably awkward about meeting the child who had replaced their daughter in the Brennan family structure. Madison, Sharon said kindly, you were a victim in this situation too. You lost your biological parents when you were too young to remember them, then you were raised with lies about your identity. None of that is your fault. Madison wiped her eyes with a tissue. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about pressing criminal charges. I think you should absolutely do it. Her announcement surprised everyone in the room. Madison, Frank said desperately, we're still your parents. We raised you with love. We made mistakes, but we're still family. You stole from both of us, Madison said firmly. You stole Rhonda's credit and career opportunities, and you stole my biological parents' money. You lied about our identities for 22 years. Love doesn't excuse criminal behavior. Carol started crying again. We were trying to hold our family together. We made poor decisions, but our intentions were good. Good intentions don't restore $400,000, Madison replied. And they don't give Rhonda back the job opportunities she lost, or the relationship with her biological parents that you prevented. David stepped forward diplomatically. Frank, Carol, you've put both girls in an impossible situation. You've committed serious crimes that have caused lasting damage to two young women who trusted you completely. Frank looked older and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. What do you want from us? Complete accountability, I said. Cooperate with law enforcement. Make full restitution for financial theft. Get professional therapy to understand why you thought any of this was acceptable behavior. And complete honesty, Madison added. About everything. To everyone. Starting immediately. Over the following week, Madison and I worked together to untangle the complex financial mess our adoptive parents had created. We filed detailed criminal complaints for identity theft and fraud. We met with investigators who documented years of systematic financial abuse. We consulted with attorneys who helped us understand our legal rights and options for recovery. The most difficult part was testifying about the emotional impact of their deception, explaining to law enforcement and legal professionals how it felt to discover your entire family identity was constructed on lies, describing the psychological damage caused by systematically hiding opportunities and manipulating finances. But something unexpected emerged during this process. Madison and I, despite not being biological sisters, began acting like genuine sisters for the first time in our lives. We supported each other through legal proceedings. We shared our anger, hurt, and confusion about identity and family authenticity. I keep wondering who I might have become if they'd told us the truth. Madison reflected one afternoon as we waited in a lawyer's office. You'd still be yourself, I assured her, just with your real name and authentic history. Emily Rose Patterson, she said thoughtfully. I researched my biological parents online. They were both teachers. They volunteered at animal rescue organizations. They seemed like genuinely good people. They were good people, and David and Sharon are good people too. The difference is that good people don't steal from children and maintain lies for 22 years. Madison was quiet for several minutes. I'm going to sell the house. I can't afford mortgage payments anyway, and it doesn't feel like mine, knowing it was purchased with stolen money and fraudulent credit. What will you do then? Start completely over. Find employment using my real name. Figure out who Emily Patterson actually is when she's not being financially supported by other people's money. What about the $28,000 remaining from your trust fund? Madison had clearly thought about this decision. I want to use half of it to help repay the money they stole from you. It won't cover everything, but it's a starting point. Madison, you don't have any obligation to do that. Yes, I do. I benefited from money that should have gone toward your opportunities. I can't give you back the job offers or the lost time with your biological parents, but I can contribute to restoring your financial security. It was the first truly selfless gesture I'd ever witnessed from Madison, and it made me realize that perhaps the person she'd been for 22 years wasn't her authentic self either. The criminal charges against Frank and Carol Brennan ultimately resulted in plea agreements requiring full restitution and supervised probation. Frank's auto shop declared bankruptcy, and they were forced to sell their house to partially repay their theft. But the real justice came from something more fundamental than legal consequences. The complete truth about our family history. During the investigation process, we discovered that Madison's adoption hadn't been as straightforward as initially presented. Her biological parents had been Emily and Thomas Patterson, not just any random couple killed in an accident. They had been close friends of Frank and Carol's, which explained how the adoption had been arranged so quickly after their deaths. We also learned that my biological parents, David and Sharon, had been much wealthier 21 years ago than the Brennans had admitted. They had owned successful businesses that they'd liquidated to pay legal fees during the custody battle. The Brennans had deliberately portrayed them as financially unstable to strengthen their own adoption case. Every new revelation reinforced how extensively and systematically Frank and Carol had manipulated our lives from the very beginning. 6 months after the initial confrontation, the legal proceedings were finally reaching resolution. Madison and I had testified in court about the financial abuse we'd endured, providing detailed documentation of identity theft, fraudulent credit accounts, and systematic deception that had lasted over 2 decades. The prosecutor, District Attorney Patricia Williams, had been particularly interested in the scope of the Brennans' criminal activity. Beyond the identity theft affecting me, they had also embezzled from Madison's trust fund and had been falsely claiming business deductions related to their auto shop for years. This case represents one of the most extensive examples of family financial fraud we've prosecuted in Adams County, DA. Williams explained during the final hearing. The defendants systematically exploited their position as adoptive parents to commit crimes against both victims over extended periods. Frank and Carol had accepted plea agreements to avoid trial. Frank received 2 years probation and was required to make full restitution for all stolen money, approximately $87,000. Carol received 18 months probation and community service requirements. Both were mandated to complete psychological counseling to address the underlying issues that had led to their criminal behavior. Most importantly for Madison and me, they were ordered to have no contact with either of us for the duration of their probation unless we specifically requested communication. Madison had legally changed her name back to Emily Rose Patterson and was working as a program coordinator for Colorado Adoption Services, a nonprofit organization that helped adopted children navigate identity issues. The irony wasn't lost on any of us, but Emily said it felt like the most meaningful way to use her experience. "I want to prevent other children from experiencing what we went through," she explained. "Being deceived about your fundamental identity causes psychological damage that takes years to heal." She was absolutely right. Even with professional therapy and the support of my biological family, I still struggled with trust issues and anxiety about whether relationships could be genuinely honest. But I was making progress day by day. My lottery winnings had been invested wisely with assistance from a financial advisor who had no connections to my family drama. The money provided security and freedom, but more importantly, it had given me independence to discover my authentic identity. I had used a portion of the winnings to establish the Collins-Patterson Foundation, an educational scholarship program for adopted children and young adults who had experienced family financial abuse. Our motto was truth and independence, and we'd already provided assistance to 63 young people starting fresh lives. David and Sharon had become the parents I'd always needed, supportive without being controlling, proud of my achievements without expecting me to sacrifice for others' benefit. They attended foundation events, celebrated my successes, and provided emotional support without requesting anything in return. Building a relationship with them had been easier than anyone expected. We shared similar values, communication styles, and approaches to problem solving. Dr. Martinez, the family therapist Sharon had mentioned, helped us navigate the complexities of reconnecting after 21 years of forced separation. The attachment bonds you formed with David and Sharon during your first 3 years were never completely severed, Dr. Martinez explained during one of our sessions. That's why reconnecting feels natural rather than forced. The relationship with Emily had been more complex to develop. We weren't biological sisters, But we'd shared 22 years of parallel experiences with the same manipulative adoptive parents. She was dealing with her own therapy and personal growth, learning to be Emily Patterson instead of Madison Brennan, discovering her authentic preferences and goals. I spent so many years trying to be the person I thought they wanted, Emily reflected during one of our weekly coffee meetings. I don't even know what I actually enjoy doing versus what I thought would make them happy. You're figuring it out, I assured her. Every day you make choices based on your own judgment instead of their expectations. You're becoming more yourself. Tyler had completely disappeared from Emily's life after learning about the trust fund depletion. Last we'd heard, he was living in Phoenix and working construction for his cousin's company, which apparently did exist, despite our earlier skepticism. Frank and Carol had attempted to contact both Emily and me several times through mutual relatives, asking for reconciliation meetings. Neither of us felt ready for those conversations. Doctor? Note: Martinez had been clear that healing from this level of betrayal required time and couldn't be rushed. Forgiveness is a process, not an event, she explained. You have every right to protect yourselves emotionally while you work through this trauma. One evening in late fall, Emily called me with exciting news. I heard back from the private investigator I hired. She found relatives of my biological parents. That's wonderful. What did you learn? My father Thomas had a brother named William who lives in Colorado Springs. He's been wondering about me since my parents died. The private investigator contacted him, and he wants to meet me. How do you feel about that? Emily was quiet for a moment, nervous but excited. It's strange to think there are people in the world who knew my biological parents and might have stories about them. David and Sharon would probably have good advice about reuniting with biological family members. Would you ask them? I trust their perspective more than anyone else's at this point. David and Sharon were indeed helpful when I asked them about Emily's situation. They suggested she meet William in a public place with emotional support available, and they offered to accompany her if she wanted additional security. Family reunification can be emotionally overwhelming, Sharon explained. Having people who care about you present can make the experience more manageable. 2 weeks later, Emily, David, Sharon, and I drove to Colorado Springs to meet William Patterson at a coffee shop near downtown. William was a man in his 60s who looked remarkably similar to Emily, with the same dark hair and expressive eyes. You look exactly like your mother did at your age, was the first thing he said to Emily, causing her to start crying immediately. William had brought photograph albums and stories about Thomas and Catherine Patterson, Emily's biological parents. They had been elementary school teachers who met during their student teaching semester and had been inseparable ever since. Your parents were the kindest people I've ever known, William told Emily. They volunteered at animal shelters every weekend, tutored struggling students for free, and were planning to have several more children before the accident. He showed Emily pictures of her biological parents at their wedding, on camping trips, holding her as a baby. Stories about family traditions, favorite foods, dreams they'd had for Emily's future. They set up a college fund for you the day you were born, William said. They talked constantly about supporting your education, whatever direction you chose. What happened to that money? Emily asked. William's expression darkened. Frank and Carol Brennan told me the legal fees for the adoption consumed everything your parents had saved. But now I'm wondering if that was accurate. Emily and I exchanged knowing looks. Given everything we'd learned about Frank and Carol's deception, it seemed likely they'd lied about Emily's original trust fund, too. I've been saving money for you since the adoption, William continued. Nothing compared to what your parents would have provided, but I put aside what I could afford every month, hoping someday I'd find you. He handed Emily a bank statement, showing an account with $43,000. This belongs to you. It's not much, but it's something to help you build your real life. Emily started crying again, but they were tears of gratitude rather than sadness. You saved money for me for 22 years? Your parents would have wanted someone to look out for you. I couldn't replace them, but I could do this small thing. As we drove back to Denver that evening, Emily was quiet for most of the trip. Finally, she spoke up from the back seat. I keep thinking about the different person I might have been if I'd grown up knowing Uncle William and hearing stories about my real parents. You're becoming that person now, David observed. Every day you learn more about your authentic family history. You're connecting with your real identity. It's like the opposite of what Frank and Carol did to us, Emily said. Instead of lies and manipulation, Uncle William gave me truth and unconditional support. That's what real family does, Sharon added. They give you roots and wings. Roots to understand where you come from. Wings to become who you're meant to be. By the end of that year, Emily had developed a strong relationship with Uncle William and had connected with several other Patterson family members. She'd learned about family traditions, medical history, and personality traits that made sense of aspects of herself she'd never understood. I had similarly deepened my relationship with David and Sharon, spending holidays with them, learning family recipes from Sharon, and helping David with home improvement projects. They'd introduced me to Colin's family relatives, including my grandparents who were still alive and thrilled to reconnect with their lost granddaughter. The contrast between these authentic family relationships and our experience with Frank and Carol was striking. Real family members celebrated our independence and growth. They shared family history honestly, supported our individual goals, and never asked for anything in return for their love. Most importantly, both Emily and I had learned to recognize the difference between genuine love and emotional manipulation. Real love didn't come with conditions or expectations. It didn't require you to sacrifice your identity or financial security for someone else's comfort. The legal proceedings had provided justice, but the personal growth and authentic family connections had provided healing. As winter approached, Emily and I realized we had both built genuine lives based on truth rather than lies, surrounded by people who loved us for who we actually were rather than who we could be manipulated into becoming. The lottery ticket that had started this entire journey was framed on my apartment wall, not because of the money it had won, but because it represented the moment our authentic lives had begun. 1 year after that life-changing graduation day, I stood in the kitchen of David and Sharon's house in Fort Collins, preparing Thanksgiving dinner with my biological family and chosen family. The scene would have been impossible to imagine 12 months earlier. Emily teaching my biological grandfather how to make her biological mother's cornbread recipe, while David and Sharon debated football teams with Uncle William. The transformation in all of our lives had been remarkable. Emily had thrived working at Colorado Adoption Services, where her personal experience with identity deception had made her an exceptional advocate for children navigating similar challenges. She'd been promoted to program director and had developed new protocols for ensuring adopted children received honest information about their backgrounds. I meet kids every week who are dealing with lies about their families, Emily explained to our gathered family. The work feels like I'm preventing other children from experiencing what we went through. She'd also blossomed personally since connecting with the Patterson family. Uncle William had introduced her to cousins, aunts, and family friends who shared stories about her biological parents. She'd learned that her artistic abilities came from her mother, Catherine, who had been a talented painter, and her mathematical skills came from her father, Thomas, who had tutored high school students in calculus. It's amazing how understanding your genetic background helps explain parts of yourself, Emily reflected. I always wondered why I was good at art and math, but struggled with writing. Now I know it runs in the Patterson family. My own journey of self-discovery had been equally profound. Working with David and Sharon had revealed personality traits and interests I'd never recognized because they'd been suppressed in the Brennan household. I discovered I loved astronomy, just as I had as a 3-year-old, and David and I spent evenings stargazing with his telescope. You were always asking questions about stars and planets when you were little, Sharon had told me. I'm not surprised you ended up studying finance. You've always been fascinated by systems and patterns. The Collins Patterson Foundation had become my primary focus, growing from a small scholarship program into a comprehensive resource center for young adults recovering from family financial abuse. We'd helped over 100 people in our first year, providing not just financial assistance, but also legal support, counseling referrals, and life skills training. What you've created here is remarkable, said Dr. Martinez during our foundation's anniversary celebration. You've turned your trauma into a tool for healing other people. The most satisfying aspect of the Foundation's work was seeing young people discover their authentic selves after escaping manipulative family situations. We'd helped a 19-year-old whose parents had been using her social security number to accumulate debt. We'd assisted a 21-year-old whose family had forced him to work in their business without pay since he was 14. We'd provided resources for a 23-year-old whose parents had convinced her she was mentally incompetent to manage her own finances. Every person we help reminds me that what happened to us wasn't unusual, Emily observed. Family financial abuse is more common than people realize. The legal resolution with Frank and Carol had been completed 6 months earlier. They'd paid full restitution, as required by their plea agreements, though the money couldn't undo the years of lost opportunities and emotional damage. More importantly, they'd completed court-mandated therapy and had written formal apology letters acknowledging the scope of their criminal behavior. We understand now that what we did was not protective parenting, but criminal activity that damaged both of you severely, Frank had written in his letter. We have no excuses for our choices, and we accept complete responsibility for the harm we caused. Carol's letter had been similar. We convinced ourselves we were holding our family together, but we were actually destroying any possibility of genuine family relationships through lies and theft. We understand if you never forgive us, and we respect your right to build authentic lives without us. Neither Emily nor I had responded to their letters. Dr. Martinez had explained that forgiveness was a personal process that couldn't be rushed or demanded by people who had caused harm. Forgiveness isn't something you owe them, she'd said. It's something you might choose for your own healing, but only if and when it feels right to you. Tyler had made one attempt to reconnect with Emily through social media, apparently after learning about her inheritance from Uncle William. She'd blocked him immediately. I'm grateful he showed his true priorities so clearly, Emily said. It helped me understand that genuine relationships aren't based on what someone can provide financially. Both Emily and I had learned to recognize authentic love versus manipulation. Real love celebrated our independence and growth. It provided support without strings attached. It told us the truth even when it was difficult or inconvenient. David and Sharon had demonstrated this consistently throughout our reconnection. They'd supported my foundation work without trying to control it. They'd celebrated my successes without taking credit for them. They'd been honest about their own struggles and limitations without expecting me to solve their problems. This is what healthy family relationships look like, Sharon had explained during one of our therapy sessions. Love that empowers rather than diminishes. Truth that builds trust rather than confusion. Uncle William had shown Emily the same kind of authentic care. He'd shared family history without expecting anything in return. He'd provided financial support without strings attached. He'd celebrated her achievements without trying to claim credit for them. The difference between Uncle William and Frank and Carol is that Uncle William wants me to become myself, Emily observed. Frank and Carol wanted me to become who they needed me to be. As we gathered around David and Sharon's dining room table that Thanksgiving, I looked at our chosen family and felt overwhelming gratitude for the journey that had brought us together. The lottery ticket had provided financial security, but the courage to seek truth had provided something infinitely more valuable: authentic family relationships based on love, rather than manipulation. I want to say something, Emily announced as we prepared to eat. A year ago, I thought family meant obligation and guilt and manipulation. Today I'm sitting with people who love me for who I actually am, not for what I can provide them. That's the real lottery win. David raised his glass to truth, healing, and the courage to choose love over fear. As we shared our meal and our stories, I realized that the most important lesson we'd learned wasn't about money or legal justice. It was about the difference between authentic relationships and performative ones. Real family didn't require you to sacrifice your identity or independence. Real love didn't come with conditions or hidden agendas. The Collins-Patterson Foundation had become our way of sharing this wisdom with other young people trapped in similar situations. We'd learned that family loyalty shouldn't be blind, that love without honesty isn't actually love, and that sometimes you have to lose the family you thought you had to find the family you actually need. What we discovered, I told the group, is that family isn't about biology or legal documents. It's about people who choose to love and support each other authentically. Emily nodded in agreement. Frank and Carol tried to control our futures by lying about our pasts. But they forgot that truth always emerges. Eventually. And when it does, you discover who you really are and who truly loves you. As the evening wound down and we prepared to drive back to Denver, Sharon pulled me aside for a private conversation. "I want you to know how proud we are of who you've become," she said. "Not just your achievements, but your character. The way you've turned your pain into purpose. The way you've helped Emily heal. The way you've built something beautiful from something terrible." "I learned from watching you and David," I replied. "You showed me that real parents never stop fighting for their children, even when the system works against them." "We would have fought forever if necessary," she said. "That's what love does." Driving home that night, Emily and I reflected on how dramatically our lives had changed in just 1 year. "Do you ever regret how everything happened?" Emily asked. "I regret the lies and manipulation and lost time," I said. "But I don't regret discovering the truth, even though it was painful. The lottery ticket was just the beginning. Finding our real families and learning who we actually are, that was the real prize." "I keep thinking about other young people who are living the way we were," Emily said. "Trapped in lies, having their opportunities stolen, thinking that's normal family behavior. That's why the foundation matters so much. Every person we help is someone who gets to discover their authentic life sooner than we did." As we pulled into my apartment complex, Emily turned to me with a smile. "You know what's funny? Frank and Carol gave you that lottery ticket trying to manipulate you into staying dependent on them. Instead, it gave you the independence to escape them completely." "The best-laid plans of manipulative people often backfire," I agreed. "Truth has a way of emerging, no matter how deeply people try to bury it." That night, as I prepared for bed in my apartment that I could afford because of lottery winnings they'd never intended for me to keep, I looked at the framed ticket on my wall and felt profound gratitude for the unexpected journey it had initiated. Frank and Carol Brennan had given me a lottery ticket, hoping to buy my compliance with their lies. Instead, they'd given me the tool I needed to discover my authentic life, reconnect with my biological family, help Emily find her true identity, and create something meaningful from our shared trauma. The $3 million had provided financial security, but the courage to demand truth had provided something infinitely more valuable. The freedom to build genuine relationships based on love, honesty, and mutual respect. Sometimes the most devastating betrayals lead to the most beautiful discoveries. Sometimes you have to lose the family you thought you had to find the family you actually need. And sometimes a simple lottery ticket can change not just your bank account, but your entire understanding of what family really means. That was worth more than all the lottery jackpots in the world. Now I want to ask you something important. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was lying to you about something fundamental? Maybe a family member, friend, or partner who manipulated your opportunities or finances? How did you find the courage to confront the truth? And what did you learn about authentic relationships versus manipulative ones? Share your story in the comments below, because your experience might provide hope or guidance to someone else who's dealing with family deception or financial abuse. If this story resonated with you and reminded you that you deserve relationships built on honesty rather than manipulation, please hit the like button to help more people find this message. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges, discovering your authentic self, and building genuine relationships. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to choose truth over comfort and people who truly value you. Thank you for listening to my journey from deception to authenticity. I hope it reminds you that real family supports your growth rather than controlling it. Real love doesn't require you to sacrifice your identity, and you always have the power to choose people who choose you back honestly. Until next time, remember that your authentic life is always worth fighting for.